Michael Ancel, the creator of Rayman, has left Ubisoft allegedly to focus on some wildlife preserve. I'm not sure whether or not I believe that. I think there's some some ulterior motive for doing this. Man, my ear still feels clogged. But I think there's some ulterior motive for doing this. I feel like there's some other reason he's abandoning the company while they're in the midst of their purge of the upper staff. It's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time until he's accused of something, until he's accused of sexual harassment, until he's displaced and fired and fined or whatever. So maybe now is a good time to leave. But the interesting thing about Ansel leaving, I've talked about this for a couple of times, I think, on stream. For one thing, this is a major Western developer leaving a company, and no one's discussing about it. Nobody's discussing it. No one cares. Rayman Legends was one of the most overtly hyped games on Wii U when it first came out, and now, 7 years later, not only are we not getting any more Rayman games, likely ever, we're probably not getting any more games from Michael Ancel himself, and nobody gives a shit. It's just, again, a really good example of just how no one actually cares about video game franchises that aren't Nintendo, because they aren't good enough for the most part. Like, sure, Rayman has had a handful of good games. Rayman 2 was really good from what I liked. I've never played 1 or 3, but always a very overhyped franchise, right? Like, this is something that fanboys will tell you was one of the defining fanboys 15, 20 years ago would have said was like one of the defining titles of the PlayStation or Dreamcast or GameCube era. And now it's basically completely forgotten, right? A completely forgotten mascot character along the same lines as Spyro, Crash, or Jak and Daxter, right? If not more so in the case of compared to someone like Crash, because I swear Spyro is way more popular than fucking Rayman is. Like, Spyro's a fucking dragon. How can you beat that? Like, Spyro, whatever you think about the games, okay, whatever you think about the games themselves, Spyro is a dragon, and that's infinitely more cool than like a Bandicoot or like an elf guy with like a little weasel Ancel thing. Like, no, Spyro is actually cool. Let's get that out of the way. Spyro wins the popularity contest in my mind. I don't even like Spyro that much, but compared to like fucking Rayman, character way cooler, way more interesting to me. Way more of a fan of Spyro. Way more nostalgic towards Spyro, I should say. So yeah, that's kind of how I feel about that. Like, Ansel leaving has changed absolutely nothing. Ubisoft is still going to put out absolute shit. They're going to put out, like, their terrible games. And we're seeing another Final Fantasy VII situation. We're seeing another The Last Guardian. If you're not aware, and we're probably not aware because Ubisoft hasn't talked about this in years, since the last time they announced this game, but Beyond Good and Evil 2 doesn't seem to be in production right now. Like, Beyond Good and Evil 2, the game that was heavily hyped as being a big deal, they were going to make it like a space building sim, they were going to do all this stuff. Like, they radically changed it from the original concept of the original Beyond Good and Evil 2, but they dropped that concept, they dropped it. They dropped, like, concept after concept after concept, like, announcing it again and again and again. And now with Ansel gone, it feels like it's finally dead in the water. Beyond Good and Evil 2 is no more. And I cannot begin to tell you just how happy I am to hear this, because the original Beyond Good and Evil is probably one of the most overhyped games I've ever seen in my life. Like, Nintendo Power considered this like their 23rd or 26th best Nintendo game ever made, right? Which is just plain ridiculous. Like, they put switch that with something like Killer 7, which was like 262 on that list, or some shit like that. Or better yet, not have Beyond Good and Evil 2 on that list at all, because Beyond Good and Evil 2, Beyond Good and Evil, the original, was not good. It was only hyped up on the basis of having, like, a female protagonist, on this idea of, like, oh, you're a journalist working to expose a government conspiracy to deal with aliens. It sounds awesome, and it does, but it's not, like, actually fun to play. Like, it's not engaging, it's not interesting. Like, when I compare it to something around the same time period, when I compare it to the vastly superior The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, like, it falls way short from, like, a gameplay perspective. Like, it's remarkable to me how, like, well Wind Waker has aged, while, like, Beyond Good and Evil has, like, aged like shit. Or rather, I think more accurately to say, was never all that good to begin with. Like, it's been a long time since I played through it, but, like, Beyond Good and Evil was one of those games that I played through and was just baffled by its popularity. It was basically an early example of the Bioshock syndrome, right? Where the idea of what makes a game good will sell the game to an audience without having to make the game itself actually fun to play. Like, there's all this shit about, like, oh, you're exposing an alien conspiracy, you're working with this rebellion, you're doing all this stuff, like, you're in this fantasy world with, like, these humanoid animals, like, it's a dystopia, you have this police state, like, you have all these ideas, but they don't come together well at all. Like, there's nothing about the game that really intrigued me at all, other than Jade herself, who is admittedly, like, a really likable protagonist. I love Jade. Like, Jade herself is the only thing I will ever praise that game for. Like, Jade herself, like, is a really interesting character. Like, I love her design, I love her personality, like, love the idea of the character, I should say, but, like, the actual execution of it, not very good. But the only thing that made the game notable, you know, its female protagonist. They decided with this sequel, Beyond Good and Evil 2, to completely drop this aspect of it, to completely not talk about Jade, to not continue the story, make it a prequel, and make it about, like, building spaceships and exploring, like, the stars or some shit. Like, I don't even remember what Beyond Good and Evil 2 was supposed to be about, but, you know, 4 years later, I can't remember when they first talked about this. I want to say 2017 or 2016. It was something along those lines. 3 or 4 years, right? 3 or 4 years we've been waiting to hear more about this game, and not only has it not shown up, not only has it not reared its ugly head in 3 years, there's no discussion about it online at all. Like, it was baffling. Like, I remember when they showed this last trailer, when they showed off, like, this shipbuilding mechanic, when they announced it was going to be a prequel, which was completely against what, like, fans of the game actually wanted. I remember people like Angry Joe, like, sitting there just being like, holy shit, this looks awesome, this looks awesome, this looks awesome. And what happened? They stopped talking about it. They stopped addressing it. They stopped bringing up the elephant in the room, in which this game has been in development hell for years and nobody wants to talk about it. Like, it feels like this project doesn't even exist, and Ubisoft just, like, sort of slaps the name Beyond Good and Evil 2 onto something when they want people to, like, start talking about them positively. Like, it's just really, like, do people not see through this? They've been talking about a sequel to Beyond Good and Evil 2, to the original Beyond Good and Evil, I think, since, like, 2009. They showed a trailer of, like, Jade, like, running from, like, the authorities or whatever, and then they, like, scrapped that for the shipbuilding thing, like, this spaceship building sim, like, trying to coast off, like, the Star Citizen thing. Like, I don't know what they were thinking. Okay, maybe that's something we can do on Leave Live tonight, is go over, like, the Beyond Good and Evil 2 trailer. But man, I am just, why did they do this? Like why are more people not calling out Ubisoft for all of their terrible decisions. Like, not even just regarding Beyond Good and Evil. Like, I'm talking about the way they treat games like Zombie U, like Rayman Legends, like their new IPs, their remakes. Like, is anyone continuing to talk about, like, what a lackluster product, Prince of Persia Remastered, is looking to be? Like, is anybody, like, following that? Like, is anyone keeping up with that? Is anyone, like, is anyone demanding that people involved in that project be fired and actually have, like, a real remaster be made? Like, no. Like, it's been forgotten. Like, there was, like, a brief spur of, like, controversy for, like, 2 days, and then people went back to, like, I don't know, bitching about Trump or whatever. Like, I saw Yang Ye bitching about Trump, like, earlier today, and I was, earlier yesterday, I think it was, and I made fun of him for it. Like, that's the reality of these people, right? They just jump from topic to topic to topic. They hype up the product they're supposed to talk about, and as a result, they don't feel like actual consumers. They don't feel like actual enthusiasts. They don't feel like actual gamers. They don't actually ask questions. They don't bring things up. They don't notice things. They don't make observations. They don't like have even real, I feel like, ideas on where the series could go. You know what I mean? Like, I did not see a lot of people be apprehensive about the idea of Beyond Good and Evil 2 being a prequel, because anyone who's played the original knows it ended on a cliffhanger where, like, we get some bullshit like Jade turns out to be, like, half Doms or some shit, which doesn't make any sense, and, like, we needed to sort of get an elaboration of what that means, like, but they never followed up on that. And we're really supposed to, like, buy this, like, prequel bullshit. Like, where is our sequel? Like, finish the story, you fucks. It's just, how hard can it be to put out this video game? I know that Beyond Good and Evil was, like, a notorious bomb, but it's one of those... This is one of those games, right, that keeps, like, popping up, like, that kept popping up over and over again for a very, very long time for no real reason. I think because this was around the time period where game journalists started, like, having very divergent opinions on what video games should be. So this one is all about, like, dealing with the man, dealing with the establishment, being a hard-hitting female journalist out to expose government corruption. The game isn't fun to play. It wasn't good. It wasn't interesting. There was nothing remarkable about it, and yet, just like there was nothing really all that remarkable about Beyond Good and Evil 2. If it was so remarkable, if it was so interesting, why is no one asking these questions? Like, why is no one asking Ubisoft regularly at, like, every conference they've had in the past 4 years, where is Beyond Good and Evil 2? No one's talking about it because they don't want you to talk about this game. All right, so that's everything I wanted to talk about today. Be sure to check out my website at blackcatbooks.org, and I will see you all next time.